We are just a few short weeks away from the launch of Phase 2 in WoW Season of Discovery, and players are excited for the new level cap of 40, new runes to find, and the never-before-seen raid edition of Gnomeregan. I'm pretty excited for this content band, but there have already been some rumors circulating about the future phases, especially regarding future raids. At BlizzCon last fall, the devs joked around with their slideshow and accidentally gave us a few clues as to what we can expect going forward after Phase 1's remake of Black Fathom Deeps. As you can see, there's an alarm bot from Gnomeregan, which was confirmed for Phase 2, the outside of the Scarlet Monastery, and a picture of the unfinished Karazhan crypts, which have become something of a cult classic ever since the early days of WoW. However, I think the most interesting one of these three, at least at this current point in time, is the Scarlet Monastery, which is predicted to be the Phase 3 Level 50 raid. This is an iconic instance that many players remember fondly, and I think Blizzard is making a good call if they do announce this for Phase 3, but there are a couple of things I want to point out today. For one, the Scarlet Monastery isn't a single instance. It's made up of 4 wings accessible from a central hub area. The graveyard, the library, the armory, and the cathedral all have their defining characteristics and bosses, but they're all a part of the same dungeon, meaning most players end up going in and out of all 4 wings at some point in their journey. In the context of making this into a raid location as opposed to a more casual dungeon though, this split layout could be a bit jarring for players wanting a more immersive experience. We also have to think about the current status of the dungeon in Season of Discovery. After doing some research online, and going to the entrance in-game to check things out, here's what I learned. Right now, the graveyard and library wings are open and are tuned for the early to mid-level 30s as expected. However, if you ghost run through the doors blocking the armory and cathedral entrances, you can't go through, and instead you receive this bizarre message. You must be at least level 20 to enter. Apart from this message being somewhat misleading with the current level cap of 25, I think this gives us some important information. It seems unlikely the devs would allow players to enter some of the wings but not others if they were going to convert all 4 wings into a raid later on, and this message to me means that only the armory and the cathedral are going to be featured in the upcoming raid. With all that being said, we still run into the issue of groups having to zone out of the first wing, walk into the hub area, and make a U-turn to get into the second half of the raid. This is where my theory comes into play, and that is that Blizzard might try to avoid this by synthesizing the 2 wings together into a massive single raid instance. Now that might sound like an unrealistic expectation, but what if I told you this monastery raid already exists in the game files? Let's take a look. This map file has actually been in the game since the early versions of vanilla, but it has never been used before. You can see here at the far end of the hub area, the 2 doors leading to the armory and cathedral open up into this singular hallway, which actually makes this theory all the more likely. The first area you come across is a copy of the Huntsman's Cloister, but since Houndmaster Loxy is already a boss in the library, I'm thinking this would be a location for either non-boss enemies or a new boss we've never seen before. Through a small room is perhaps the biggest plot twist in this version of the dungeon. Players enter through a hallway on the bottom floor of the Hall of Champions, and it's only after defeating Herod that they can progress up the stairs to the next area. It is here where groups can either turn left or right. Taking the left path leads through a torture chamber similar to the one found in the graveyard, and eventually ends in a grassy courtyard. With Interrogator Vicious presumably still in the graveyard wing, my best guess is that a new boss could be added here in the garden. Maybe another Interrogator, or a caster who you could block line of sight to using the pillars. Taking the right path takes you down a library hallway that doesn't seem to have any great locations for bosses, but there could potentially be a new boss patrolling down the middle. After this, one last hallway brings you right inside the heart of the cathedral, where the final showdown between your group and the dynamic duo of Mograine and Whitemane would go down. You might notice that in this scrapped version of these 2 combined wings, some areas like the cannonball rooms and the cathedral garden have been removed. Additionally, with the bosses I mentioned, there are only around 3 main ones that would be included here, which is a bit low for a 10-person raid. So I think a couple new encounters would have to be added at the locations I mentioned earlier. The monastery also seems a bit small compared to Phase 2's Gnomeregan, so I could also see the devs stitching in a few more of the removed areas, or adding some new chunks entirely to make the raid seem more grandiose. This is home base for the entire Scarlet Crusade faction, and I think with a few more bosses and areas to uncover, neither of which would take that much of a time commitment from Blizzard, this could make for a massive surprise when Phase 3 drops in just a couple of months. Phase 1 is going to last a total of 70 days, and going off of that we could estimate Phase 2 lasting a similar amount of time, or maybe a bit shorter with some players believing the phase has dragged on too long. I'm going to predict Phase 3 going live sometime in April or maybe early May at the latest, but we'll see what happens. What do you all think of this potential Scarlet Monastery raid scenario? After 20 years, maybe we'll unlock the potential of this secret map file in Season of Discovery. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, may the Force be with you.